Joining me now, NBC Investigations reporter Tom Winter, former assistant U.S. attorney and MSNBC legal analyst Mimi Rocah, and our panel, John Podhoretz, editor at Commentary Magazine, New York Post columnist, and an MSNBC contributor, Caitlin Huey-Burns, Real Clear Politics national political reporter, and Gabe DeBenedetti, New York Magazine national correspondent. Tom, let's start with you. This is the third superseding indictment on Paul Manafort. What does Robert Mueller have on him now?
Katie, today's charges directly reflect something we learned earlier this week, and that is an attempt by Manafort, according to prosecutors, to tamper with witnesses, to kind of guide their testimony, for them to say, and the root of this goes to Manafort's political lobbying efforts here in the United States on behalf of the Yanukovych regime in Ukraine. And basically, he was trying to guide them to say, hey, you didn't do any work in the United States, remember? It was all work that was done in Europe. So basically, in an attempt by Manafort to kind of guide them, Konstantin Kilimnik is somebody who's been referenced in court documents, although not specifically named before by Mueller's team. As we've previously reported, he's somebody that the U.S. government believes has ties to Russian military intelligence. So Kilimnik is mentioned today. He's one of the people that are, he's one of the persons that was charged along with Paul Manafort. It's two charges having to do with conspiracy to obstruct justice as well as obstructing justice. And so those charges are tied to those efforts to try to tamper with witnesses. They say the two of them worked together to try and do that. This is now the third superseding indictment in this case, meaning that we have this is the third time that Mueller's team has come in with new charges based on evidence they've come up with. Manafort's team has not yet responded to this. He's, of course, pled not guilty to the charges in the past, and so we're waiting to hear what he says. He has to respond by today.
Wow.
A judge told him to respond today to these tampering allegations that were raised earlier this week. So, Katie, we're going to wait to see what he has to say about all that.
And right now he's on bail under house arrest. Paul Manafort, or Robert Mueller, excuse me, is trying to get the judge to revoke that bail. When will a decision be made on that?
So, Katie, we expect Manafort's team to respond to that, like I said, today. And then next week, they're going to have a hearing to talk all of this over. It's a little unclear to me whether or not, with today's superseding indictment, whether or not they're going to wait to hold a hearing on that. And so will the judge at that point make a decision, or will she make a decision next Friday on whether to revoke or modify his bail? It's difficult to see where they would modify his bail further, because he's already, as you mentioned, he's on home confinement. He's got GPS monitoring. So he's very restricted right now in what he can do. It would appear that this is starting to lean towards Paul Manafort being held in jail until his D.C. trial commences sometime this fall.
And if I remember correctly, he is wearing two monitoring bracelets on both legs, right, Tom?
I think they've been able to get it down to just one at this point, Katie. But yes, at one point you are correct. He was able to have he had both.
Mimi Rocah, extrapolate for us these new court filings. Where do you think the investigation is going?
Well, I want to make one point that Tom raised, which is now that these new superseding charges have been filed, Manafort will get arraigned or brought before the court and have these charges sort of read to him and explained to him. That could possibly happen now before Friday. The hearing that is scheduled for Friday is about his bail, but it may be that now the court schedules some kind of arraignment sooner on these charges, and that the bail issue might get dealt with sooner. We just don't know yet. And I think that the fact that Mueller has now brought the obstruction charges in the indictment, as opposed to just alleging them in a letter, as he had done previously, now makes detention much more likely. It's hard for Manafort's lawyers to argue, well, they haven't charged us. These are just allegations. No, these are charged now. This is something that's been proven already by probable cause, and, that Mueller believes he could certainly prove in court, or he wouldn't have brought the charges. As for where this goes, I think this is significant for a couple of reasons, because it shows Manafort's really deep ties with Konstantin Kilimnik, who, as everyone I think knows by now, certainly has ties to Russian intelligence. You've heard the saying, you can't be a former Russian intelligence officer. And so, and it's not just with respect to these obstruction charges. It shows Kilimnik's involvement going back many years with Manafort and during the time of the campaign. So Manafort was interacting and doing this scheme, this lobbying scheme, this attempt to hide his actions on behalf of Ukraine from the U.S. government during the time that he was a campaign manager with this former Russian intelligence officer. So this puts Manafort really deep in it. This is, whatever C word you want to use, collusion, conspiracy, this is it. Manafort's in it. And now the real question is, what's he going to do? Is he going to cooperate? And if he does, what's he going to say about Trump's knowledge or involvement or other people in the campaign about these activities?
I want to talk to you about witness tampering specifically, because that's what these new charges are around. The indictment says the defendants knowingly and intentionally attempted to corruptly persuade another person with intent to influence, delay, and prevent the testimony of any person in an official proceeding. Could you make the argument that the president has attempted to persuade witnesses himself? He's been going after Jeff Sessions most recently, tweeting about him just 3 days ago. And Sessions is somebody who has been interviewed by the special counsel.
Well, look, I mean, that's certainly the one of the things that Mueller is looking at. Are Trump's repeated sort of, attacks on Sessions, on Comey, on and then the dangling pardons to other witnesses? Are those attempts to get them to either, shut down the investigation, change their testimony? And, I think to a lay person, you're just looking at it in the sense of, it looks like it, but in the sense of, can you charge that to meet the elements of the crime? I'm not sure. And I think that's really going to take Mueller piecing together a lot of different acts. I keep coming back to the Trump Tower cover-up, the meeting in the Trump Tower. I think that's very significant evidence of intent to obstruct. I don't think standing alone it would be enough, but I think it adds a lot to the things like you're talking about.
Guys, it's been a crazy week in the Mueller probe, the revelations that we've had coming out of it. It began with the leak of Trump's letter, that legal letter to Robert Mueller's team, saying that, yes, he did dictate the letter about Trump Jr.'s statement. Paul Ryan joining Trey Gowdy to say, no, there was no spy in the president's campaign. Giuliani alleging that Manafort is trying, or that Robert Mueller is trying to frame the president. And now Manafort being indicted. I mean, that's a lot to happen in just 1 week.
Right, but the Manafort story is bizarre. Here's why. There are a bunch of charges against Manafort. The least of them is that he was an unregistered foreign lobbyist, something on which only 6 people have been tried in close to 50 years. There's a money laundering charge, which is much more serious than other charges. This superseding indictment involves him trying to witness tamper on the question of whether he was an unregistered foreign lobbyist. He's trying to tell these 2 people who are unnamed, send them hints that they should say that they did no work in the United States when they did. That is bizarre. He could almost certainly get out of being sent to jail for being an unregistered foreign lobbyist. No one ever really has. So
what do you make of
would
that?
he? I don't know, but I mean, it's stupid. What the first thing it looks like is that it's like really stupid. That's not something that he needed to, threaten his freedom by witness tampering, which everybody knows is a really serious felony.
Well, but the obvious question that's raised by this then is, well, what is he trying to cover up? And if we're going to take this to the logical conclusion, it's that what he's trying to stop them from talking about, this foreign lobbying arrangement that he had, was much more serious than we know about and much more extensive than we know about. That raises even more questions about the broader scope of Mueller's probe. And, if we've learned one lesson this week, but really every single week, it's that this thing is much wider than any of us know.
We never hear from Robert Mueller's team. The only time we hear from them are through the court filings. You have the president trying to go out and tear down their credibility, saying Spygate, et cetera. Giuliani, who's basically acting as the president's spokesperson now, saying they're trying to frame him. We talk about the messages that the president could be sending to Mueller with pardons. Is this a message from Mueller to the president? Don't obstruct justice. Well, I'm going to get serious about even the nittiest of gritty things.
Exactly. I mean, it's interesting on a couple different levels. This event today combined with everything that happened this week. One, of course, we don't know where this probe is going. Every other week, it seems like there's something that comes down, and we see the president react to that in real time. This event today, combined with what we saw from Trump's lawyers and the controversy over the statement that the president made at the time, that the White House made at the time of the Donald Trump Jr. letter in Trump Tower, with what his lawyers said that he actually did dictate that, creates this additional problem for the president insofar as he continues to weigh in on this, he continues to put himself further and further into jeopardy as it pertains to this case. All the while they're trying to denigrate the case entirely, they're kind of building themselves back into it in lots of different ways.
Mimi, button this up for us. What are you looking out for next?
Well, I think that, all these cries of there was no collusion, there was no, we did nothing wrong with the Russians. I think, that is not true. There's been no finding that there hasn't been collusion or conspiracy. And in fact, the more hints that we get from Mueller, as you say, he speaks not often, but when he does, we see the Russians coordinating with various members of the Trump campaign. And this is yet another sign of that. Manafort's closeness with Kilimnik and not just in the obstruction, which is serious and he is charged in that. But Kilimnik shows up throughout this indictment in trying to defraud the U.S. And so I think we are going to see more of that.
Tom Winter, thank you very much. Mimi, John, Caitlin, and Gabe, stay with us.
Hello, YouTubers. If you're watching this, it means you've checked out our channel, so thank you. Now do me a favor, subscribe by clicking on that button down there. Click on any of the videos to watch the latest interviews and highlights from MTP Daily and MSNBC. You can get more Meet the Press content every morning in the First Read newsletter. If you're tired of content that you don't know anything about where it came from, you don't have to have that problem with us. NBC News, MSNBC, MTP, and the Meet the Press mindset right here for you on YouTube. Subscribe now.